Hey guys, Tokaine here, back again with another Evoker guide. Today we're going to be looking at the Augmentation Evoker, which is the new spec coming in 10.1.5. Now if you want a quick summary on how this spec works, imagine an old school bard, but instead of playing a lute or tooting a horn, you're going to be throwing rocks at people and shouting encouragement at your allies. Augmentation Evoker is a first of its kind for World of Warcraft. It's a primarily buff-focused spec. You're still a DPS, you're still going to be doing damage, but a lot of your damage is going to be coming from your allies and buffing them and synergizing with them. However, you are not just bringing damage to your raid, you're also bringing several other forms of utility, such as movement speed, shields, the ability to cast while moving from 3 million miles away. This class has got a lot, so let's get into it. So this is the standard build you're going to be running for pretty much every single scenario in Augmentation Evoker. The class talents are almost identical to Devastation Evoker, so that's really easy there if you're swapping over to give it a try. However, with the new spec comes a new talent tree. So let's take a look at that. Even Might is the main spell that really defines Augmentation Evoker. What this does is it increases 4 allies' primary stat by 10% of your own, and it additionally increases your damage by 10% while the buff is active. Now there is a way to extend this buff. One of these ways is through Eruption. Now this is effectively Augmentation Evoker's Disintegrate and your main essence spender, and this is how you're going to be spending your essence pretty much throughout your entire rotation. Every time you cast this ability, your Even Might buff duration is increased by 1 second on every single ally affected by the buff. 2 other ways to increase the duration of Even Might is through your empowered spells, Fiery Breath, which we're all familiar with, and the new one, Upheaval, which is effectively Eternity Surge for Augmentation Evoker. Now, Upheaval increases its radius based on how long you channel it. However, it is important to note that your empowered spells extend Eben Might's duration by 3 seconds, regardless of their empowerment level. So a Fiery Breath, empower level 1 compared to 3, will still extend it by 3 seconds. The final way to extend Eben Might is through your ability Breath of Eons. Now this is going to be your main cooldown, and the interesting thing about this is, do you remember the Warlords of Draenor rings? This effectively works in the same way. What it does is stores up a portion of damage that your allies affected by Eben Might do to the target, and then explodes at the end, guaranteed to crit. So it is very important that you synchronize this up with your DPS cooldowns, otherwise you will not be getting much effectiveness out of it. Blistering Scales is a vital talent that you will also be taking for Augmentation Evoker. What this ability does is it provides a buff to a specific target, and their armor is increased by 30% of your own. This is going to be very good to put on tanks. Another very powerful talent is Spatial Paradox. So Spatial Paradox is effectively Spirit Walker's Grace for any healer of your choosing. And not only is it Spirit Walker's Grace, which allows them to cast while moving, but it also increases the range of their spells by 100%. So you could have a Disc Priest ramping from somewhere in the corner of the boss room without a worry in the world, and it would be fine. You also gain the benefits of this buff for its duration, which means your casting range will go from 25 yards to a whopping 50 yards. You get to feel like a normal range DPS for once. The other main mechanic that Augmentation Evokers are going to be doing is keeping prescience up on their 2 chosen targets. This will most likely be DPS, however there are going to be moments where there's a large incoming amount of raid damage and it could be worth putting on a healer. But what this buff does is it increases the target's crit by 3%, and additionally, because of the capstone Fate Mirror, you will also give them a chance for their spells to echo again, dealing 15% of the total damage or healing of the original spell. The last notable talent to mention is Time Skip. This is a very simple ability that, while channeled, increases your cooldown regeneration rate by 1000%. This will most likely be used during your opener, just to ensure that you have an extended Eben Might uptime on pull. Right, let's talk about stats for the class. Now, you'll be glad to hear that the stats that Augmentation Evoker needs, they're pretty much the best for Devastation as well, with Mastery being our best stat as well. Our Mastery Time Walker does 2 things. Firstly, whenever we use an empowered ability, we grant allies around us versatility based on our total mastery. This buff is called Shifting Sands. Additionally, our mastery also increases the duration of our helpful buffs, such as Eben Might, Shifting Sands, and Breath of Eons. Almost guarantees that mastery is our best stat due to the double effects that we gain from it. Both haste and crit are about equal in value, and versatility is at the bottom. The sad truth is that Augmentation Evoker just doesn't scale well with secondary stats. However, we scale exceptionally well with main stat. So because of Ebon Might, our main stat is incredibly important, as Ebon Might grants 10% of our main stat to our allies that we buff. This means that item level will almost certainly be the best choice for you when you're looking at gearing, outside of necks and rings of course, as they do not have any main stat on them. So with Augmentation Evoker being introduced mid-patch and mid-tier, our tier sets, they're not going to be that intuitive to play with. Our 2-piece grants the effect, while Ebon Might is active, your empowered spells deal 30% increased damage. And our 4th-piece, the bonus granted to allies based on your total intellect, is simply increased by 1%. Like I said, not really intuitive, but hopefully with 10.2 and the next tier, we will get a set that we can play more around. Some other important notes to make are on the trinkets that Augmentation Evoker are going to use. Now I hope you guys like farming Halls of Infusion, because Iridia's Fragment, yep, that's the one, that's going to be the best trinket for Augmentation Evoker right now. And that's just because of the large amount of main stat that it provides, which you can use on pull to further boost your allies. Your second trinket will be less important, but some of the good options are the Vessel of Searing Shadows from the Amalgamation Chamber, the Voodoo Doll from Underrot, Igneous Flowstone from Magmarex, or the class trinket from Neltharion. And finally, we are talking about our embellishments. Now, unfortunately for our top DPS, you're going to be a slow boy, as you'll be running the Acidic Hailstone Treads plus a Toxified Armored patch somewhere on your gear. However, if you don't like being slow, there are other options such as running just the Acidic Hailstone Treads with a Shadowflame Tempered Armored patch, or you could even run 2 of the Shadowflame Tempered Armored patches. Those are generally going to be your best options for embellishments. So let's go over the rotation, or I should say priority system, as most classes have these days. So what you're going to be mainly doing is maintaining your prescience on 2 people. Again, I would recommend DPS. And this will be cast on cooldown, so make sure you have some weak aura, or it's very clear on your UI the durations you have on the current targets, as this is one of your most vital parts of the kit. You're also going to be tracking Ebon Might and making sure that that is kept up for as much as possible. You're going to want to recast that if there's only about 4 seconds left on the buff. Again, I highly recommend you have a weak aura which tracks this, as these are the 2 most important things you will be consistently providing to your allies. Next, you're going to be using Fire Breath at max rank when possible. Prioritize using Tip the Scales with Fire Breath, otherwise you'll use it at lower ranks just to maintain your Ebon Might buff. The level of empowerment of your spells doesn't give more time to your Ebon Might buff, it's just very situational, but generally you're going to want to use Fire Breath at a higher rank just for the Leaping Flames talent which you run. After Fire Breath, your other Empower spell, Upheaval, is going to be one you'll be using. Again, you can use this at rank 1. The radius of it increases with each empowerment level, so this is irrelevant on single target. You're then going to want to use your Breath of Eons. This is a very high priority ability. However, I do recommend that you synchronize this with your DPS. This ability is completely reliant on how much damage your allies do, so make sure you do have that synced, otherwise this ability will lose a lot of its effectiveness. So for example, it is a 2-minute cooldown, and if your fellow 2-minute DPS classes are holding their cooldowns for a specific time in the fight, then you too should hold Breath of Eons until they pop their cooldowns. Outside of all these, you're going to be casting Living Flame while you have the Leaping Flames buff. You'll then want to use Time Skip if it's available, just to help reduce the cooldown of your empowered abilities to increase the duration of Ebon Might further. After this, you're going to be spending your essence on Eruption. This ability does increase the duration of Ebon Might by 1 second for every cast you complete. The next ability on the priority system is Blistering Scales, which you'll most likely be putting on the tank. However, if you don't have a prop warrior, then the highest DPS you can gain as a raid is putting it on a DPS warrior. However, you do lose the defensive bonus from putting it on the tank, so this is mainly a farm thing, or if your tanks, they don't need it, and you just want to do as much damage as possible. And finally, for your fillers, if you have Ancient Flame and Scarlet Adaptation talented, you'll be wanting to using an Emerald Blossom just to increase your Living Flame damage, and then you just use Living Flame and Azure Strike as a filler. Now that may have sounded like a lot, but it's very simple once you actually start playing the class. It's effectively a 3-button rotation, honestly, and it's all about keeping Prescience and Ebon Might up on the important targets. So I'll just quickly go over the opening sequence for Augmentation Evoker. So you're going to do a few things on pre-pull, and that is using Prescience on your 2 select targets as well as Blistering Scales. And just before the pull, you're going to use Ebon Might, Tip the Scales, and pre-cast a Living Flame. Now once the pull has begun, you're going to use a max rank Fire Breath with the Tip the Scales and a rank 1 upheaval, followed by a Breath of Eons. Make sure, again, you hold this Breath of Eons if your DPS aren't fully popping on pull, but most of the time you will. After this, you will use your potion on your trinkets, use time skip, and you will then rebuff Prescience on your first target, while spamming Eruption and Living Flame, waiting for Fire Breath and Upheaval to come off cooldown. You need to make sure that you keep Prescience up on your 2 chosen DPS, as your entire job is to maintain their Prescience buff and Ebonmite buffs throughout your spells. You may ask, Tokaine, what about multi-target? Well, the thing about this class is you will pretty much do the exact same rotation on multi-target, except you'll have a few changes. For example, you'll use Upheaval at a higher rank so it has an increased radius. You'll most likely have the talent Pupa of Alexstrasza, and that just ensures that your Living Flame will cleave 2 targets by default. A lot of your damage does come from your allies, so you're going to have to be very team orientated. You're going to have to synchronize with what they do, and that's the whole bread and butter of what this class is about. Augmentation Evoker provides a lot of utility as well. One of these is Aspect's Favour. You will have 2 different stances, Black Attunement and Bronze Attunement, and these will give your 4 nearest allies a passive boost to either max health or movement speed, depending on which attunement you're in. They're not much on their own, however with Aspect's Favour, a talent, it makes it so that if you either use Obsidian Scales or Hover, it will empower both of these attunements. So Obsidian Scales will increase the max health gain from 4% to 16% for your allies, and Hover will increase the movement speed from 10% to 40%. So think of a small mini Roar / Rallying Cry. It is important to take note though that if you use, for example, Obsidian Scales and then cast a Hover, it will swap your attunement and it will cancel the health buff from Obsidian Scales, so make sure you keep an eye on that and remember that they cancel each other out. Another really powerful talent that Augmentation Evokers have is Chrono Ward, and what this does is gives your entire raid a shield of up to 30% of their maximum health based on the damage they deal during your Breath of Eons window. So this, timed well, will be exceptionally powerful for large damage overlaps in raid, and even Mythic Plus as well. So I know that might have seen a lot, but that's pretty much everything right now. I do want to highly stress that this class is coming mid-patch. There's going to be a lot of things broken with it, and a lot of things in this video are subject to change. There is a written version of this guide on method.gg/guides, and also the Evoker Discord has plenty of resources to help you learn and understand not just Augmentation Evoker, but Devastation and Preservation as well. I do just want to stress once again that everything with Augmentation Evoker is subject to change, and enjoy it while it lasts, because even though I think this spec is insanely fun, it's insanely broken and pretty bad for the game in its current state, but with a few tweaks here and there, I think this spec is going to be a really core part of WoW moving forward, and it's interesting to see what they're going to do on top of this for the next expansion, for example. Anyway, that's been me, Tokaine with Method. Remember to do all the YouTube jargon, subscribe, smash that like button, share to your friends, you know what you gotta do. And I'll see you in the next one. Have a nice day. Peace.